Hello and welcome to Twisted Britain, a podcast in true crime in Britain with a sprinkling of the weird and the macabre. I'm sat, as always, in the settle-in, recording with my pint in front of me. We are set every week a challenge from another podcaster or a friend of the show in some way, and I'll get to that in a second. I do have an incredibly twisted story, possibly the most twisted one I've told so far, from a case from the 1970s. It was set by a good friend of Twisted Britain, Phill at Aethuran Dark Saga. I'll get on to that in a sec. First off, I'd like to start this by saying thank you very much to everyone who expressed some kind words on the old Tinterweb after the first episode of the new format. It meant a lot, and I promise that I have had an entire pint before we started recording this time, so hopefully the nerves will have gone. After last week's episode, which was set by Bethan from Seeing Red, she set the word cats as my challenge. And I hope I did her some justice with the story. I did manage to catch up with Bethan afterwards and have a wee chat with her to see what she thought of it, to see what her takeaway thoughts were from the story I told. And I managed to record that chat. The audio isn't the best, as this is the first time I've done this, and I'm going to work out how it'll get better in the future and stuff like that. So apologies for the audio quality, but we'll get there, don't worry. So this is what Bethan had to say. Hey Bethan, thanks for joining me on Twisted Britain this week. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's nice to have somebody to talk to this time rather than sitting in the pub on my own. So yeah, thanks very much for joining us. I'm not
going to try and do a Scottish accent though, because that could be embarrassing.
Yeah, I've gotten into trouble for accents before, so I think we'll just leave it at that. Yeah. So you set me the challenge last episode of cats, which is very good of you, because you're a mad cat lady.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me as your first as well in the new sort of start of the podcast. I'm so very honoured.
No, thanks very much. Like I said in the recording before, it was cool to have you or Mark along because, well, we all started doing this rather crazy hobby at the same time. So, yeah, thanks for coming on and doing that.
Yeah, I was a little bit nervous though because I sort of like, right, I'll say cat, and then my mind went straight to probably what came up on Google that you mentioned, the Croydon cat killer, and I thought, oh my god, if he covers that, I can't listen. So I'm so glad you didn't.
It was quite literally the first thing that came up when I Googled cat crimes UK, and I went, there's absolutely no way she wants me to cover that. So we'll see what we'll see where my brain goes, and we came up with cat burglars. So
yeah, I thought it was brilliant. So it's a good link.
Yeah, Peter Scott is a very interesting character. And I was actually really glad that I could do this because I'd done a cat burglar before, and I was like, oh, you need to leave it some time between things. And then when you came up with it, and I was like, there's that one guy that nicked Sophie Loren's diamonds, and you go back and have a look at that. So thank you for the opportunity to go and do that. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really did. And it's not something I actually knew anything about. So I completely learned about someone completely new, which was really good.
Good. That's what we're here for, I suppose, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah, I think one of the best compliments I had about it was somebody said any podcast would be fine with Sophie Loren's voice in it, and I can't really argue with that.
Just somehow managed to fit her into every episode, you'll be winning.
Yeah, exactly. I just have to change the theme and the everything, but yeah, we'll work it out somehow.
I loved your accent as well. It was very French, but it worked.
That was that was a pint in, and I thought it was Italian, but until it came out of my own mouth, and I went, "That is not Italian at all." But once you've committed, you need to stick with it.
Exactly, own it.
So yeah.
No, I thought it was really, really good. I thought it was a really interesting episode, and I wasn't really sure how your new sort of format was going to work. I was kind of intrigued by it, and I thought it sounded like a great idea. And then actually hearing it worked really, really well. And hopefully it felt the same for everybody else listening. But I think especially for me, having set you the task, I felt like you were just telling me a story, and it was lovely. I was just having someone tell me a story. It was great.
There you go, your own personalised Twisted Britain, just for you.
Exactly. I thought that is really cool.
Good. Well, I'm glad it came across like that. That's what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a bit kind of storytelly. As you know, as a long-time listener, we don't like facts too much, but we do like a good story. So we're going to hopefully stick with that. And I've had a couple more other podcast creators have come along and offered me some challenges and stuff like that. So next week's one should be
brilliant.
Fun.
Lovely. I'll make sure Mark does one at some point as well.
Yeah, if you could get Mark to do one, that'd be cool. And we'll do that one down the line again, and then we'll maybe try and hook up the three of us and do a Twisted Red again. That would be good fun.
Yeah, that was a good crossover.
Yeah, let's do that again sometime. That'd be really cool.
Definitely.
Well, like I said, thank you very much, Bethan, for helping us out, and I will no doubt speak to you again sometime soon. And we will...
Lovely.
We'll keep in touch. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank
See
you.
you soon.
Thank you. Love you. Bye.
Bye.
So there you go. That was Bethan's brief thoughts on it. She seemed to like it, so that's the kind of main reason we're here. And going forward, that's how all of our episodes will appear. We'll have our challenge set 1 week, and then I'll try and catch a chat with whoever sets the challenge, and play that at the beginning of the next episode. Where I can't get a chat with them, I'll get somebody to get them to record something themselves and send it over to me, and we'll play that out at the start. So we'll always have somebody feeding back, which is hopefully always going to go well, but we can't always guarantee these things. So anyway, this week we move on to Phill from Aethuran Dark Saga. And Phill is a wonderful creator of podcasts. And if you're a fan of dark fantasy, you absolutely have to go and check out his podcast. I'm going to freely admit here that I don't really remember how I came across Dark Saga, but I'm really glad I did. Phill is an incredible voice talent, and does, which you will see in a minute when I play you his challenge. He's also been a really, really good friend of Twisted Britain from the very start, and I'll put a link to his show in the description of the episode. And like I say, if you like dark fantasy, you will love Phil's creation. It's one I've said to him before that he should write it all down and release it as a book, because it would be amazing. But in lieu of that, go back and check out his podcast. You should enjoy it. So anyway, without further ado, here is Phil's challenge.
Hello there, it's the jolly old Englishman from the Aethuran Dark Saga podcast, Philip Usher. Really glad to see Bob's kept a stiff upper lip and decided to keep ploughing on. Flogging a dead horse springs to mind. But in all seriousness, I'm glad to see that Bob is continuing with it. Love Twisted Britain, been a fan since the second episode. Sad to see Nadine's gone, but let's face it, we've all got to move on. So, Bob, the word I'm looking for is blancmange. I'm only joking. Keeping in theme with my own show, I want a D, please, Bob. D for demons. Good luck.
Demons. Thanks, Phill. I think. I'll be happy to admit to you all that I kind of got over the shock of, hang on, did he say blancmange? Oh, shit. Oh, no, wait, that's fine. He didn't. We can carry on. I will say, however, these are Phil's words. He apologises that you can hear the Burns cartoons in the background. And my thoughts were, oh, thank fuck he's not wanting a creamy dessert crime. But yeah, so demons. This week's challenge was demons. So I really actually wasn't sure if demons was going to be any easier than blancmange, to be honest. So I did a bit of the old interweb searching and found a load of things like demon dogs and on different moors across Britain, and bits and pieces that I thought, I don't really want to tell a big dog story, and I don't want to, these are all really bitty things like that. And then, well, I stumbled across this story I'm about to recount for you. Now, this story has been covered by other podcasts, and it's been done really well by others. And one of the first ones that I went to listen to after I found it was The True Crime Enthusiast. Now, Paul, True Crime Enthusiast, actually did it as his first ever podcast when he moved from a blog to a podcast, which was cool because I got to go back and listen to his first episode. So if you get to the end of the story and you want to hear somebody else's taking on it, go back and listen to the first ever episode of the True Crime Enthusiast. And a big shout out to Paul, of course. If you haven't listened to the True Crime Enthusiast, go and subscribe now. It's a great pod. I will start off this by saying this is a pretty gruesome story at the end. And it's not often that I say that this is one of the most twisted stories I think I'll ever tell, but this is definitely it. So consider yourselves warned. This is the story of the Ossett Satanic murders. It's a bit of a weird one, and I suppose any story that you try and incorporate demons into would be a weird one. This is the story of the murder of Christine Taylor and her family dog at the hands, and I do mean the hands, of her husband, Micheal Taylor. Micheal and his family, including 5 children, lived in the small town of Ossett in West Yorkshire. He was a very friendly family man, described by the neighbours as a kind, caring family man who took great care of his family around him. With the only issue he seemed to have was that he had a bad back that caused him to be in a lot of pain and left him struggling to find long-time work, which in turn led to a small bout of depression. Now, like I said, this was 1970s in Britain, and 1970s Britain was a place of deep depression in the economy anyway, so work wasn't that easy to come by, and the fact that he had this back didn't help. It led to him being unemployed quite a lot. He was a butcher by trade, but wasn't working at the time that we're going to talk about. So like I say, Micheal was a kind, loving family man. However, this was all set to change over the course of a very short period, culminating in what is a horrible murder fueled, it is claimed, by a botched exorcism and demonic possessions. I'm going to start, before I go any further in this, I'm going to go with I'm not a huge believer in demonic possessions and all this exorcism stuff, which if you've listened to Twisted Britain in the past, Nadine and I have covered other bits and pieces. Mainly Nadine was her this was her bag, but there are a few opinions in here that are entirely my own, which I think you'll probably be able to gather which ones are which by the time we get to the end. So anyway, how did this seemingly idyllic family scenario change? Well, Micheal and Christine weren't particularly religious, and which for a small town in the Yorkshire area of England at the time, where church would take a kind of centre point in the community, wasn't the norm. And as such, the family were a bit separate from the local community. And through their separation from the local community and Michael's bad back leading to his depression, a family friend suggested that they start to attend a local church group called the Christian Fellowship Group. Now, I will not use the word cult yet. Whether it was out of a want to integrate a bit in the community or maybe to try to relieve Michael's depression by making him meet other people, we'll never know. But either way, they joined in with this group, which was led by a woman named Marie Robinson. Marie was a 21-year-old woman and wasn't in any way that I could find an ordained minister or anything. She just seemed to be a passionate leader, a good talker, and we'll see a bit more about her as we go on. Marie was a massive part of the reason that Micheal carried on with this group. Like I said, he wasn't a Christian man, but he stuck with this group. And it's either he fell for her or he fell under her brainwashing. Whichever it was, Micheal began to attend the group on a fairly regular basis, a lot more so than his wife Christine did, or the rest of the family did, in fact. And he got to the point of being a very active member of the congregation, even on occasion leading the group. One instance that is talked about is a night when both Micheal and Christine were attending the group. And Marie, during the service, had asked Micheal to stand up and she would cure his bad back. Micheal thought, oh, what the heck, why not? And started walking towards the front of the church. I say church, or of the room they were meeting in. And as he was walking towards her, Marie started walking towards him. They were to meet in the middle. And there was an old woman in the congregation who started to break down in tears. And Marie stopped at this woman and stood over her, placing her hands on her head and started talking nonsense, speaking in tongues. When Micheal crouched down beside the woman and out of the blue, having never done it before, started reciting ancient verse in tongues to her. Now, I'd like to pause here for a second and say that randomly speaking in tongues actually has a name, and it's glossolalia, and it's defined as the utterance of approximating words and speech that is usually produced during states of intense religious experience. So pretty much exactly what we're talking about now. There's a huge thing going on. She was going to heal him, but this woman breaks down in tears, and they need to heal this woman. And they were talking about bringing God to her and forcing the spirits out of her and all this. Anyway, Maria believed that during these experiences that she went through, that the Holy Spirit entered her body and allowed her to heal people. Michael, following this experience that night, started to believe that he was some sort of vessel as well. And because of this, he started to spend more and more time with Maria and the group and less time with his actual family. Christine, his wife, was obviously not a fan of the scenario, to say the least, and believed there might be a little more going on there. Maybe a wee bit of nighttime activities, not to put too much of a crude point on it. And all of this culminated in Christine accusing the two of them one night during a group meeting. She accused the pair of having a different type of intense experience together. Now, the reaction to this accusation wasn't quite what you would think. Well, I suppose it is, in the first instance, what you would think. As you would probably guess, Michael didn't take the accusation too well. And that's fine. I would imagine that anybody accused of this wouldn't take it too well. But it was the direction of his anger that was the weird thing. It was directed at Maria and not his wife. Michael, in fact, flew into a rage. Apparently his face turned to that of the devil himself, and he attacked Maria, screaming in tongues at her and slapping her around the head. And it reached its crescendo when Michael threw her across the room, knocking her out. When she came to, Michael was stood over her. He was being restrained, however, by other members of the church. And during the restraint, he snapped out of his trance. He was completely knackered and with no memory of doing it at all. Maria later said, "I suddenly glanced at Mike, and his whole features changed. He looked almost bestial. He kept looking at me, and there was a real wild look in his eyes. I started screaming at him out of fear. I started speaking in tongues. Michael also screamed at me in tongues. I was on the verge of death, and I seemed to come to my senses. I knew that only the name of Jesus would save me. And just saying over and over again, Jesus. When Christine heard me calling the name of Jesus, she started saying it too, and I believe firmly that it's only by calling his name that I was not killed." Michael tried to apologize for his actions in the following days, but however, his state continued to deteriorate in that there was something obviously wrong with him, and the local vicars had seen enough. They declared Michael to be possessed by a demon. Now, how do you get a demon out of you? Well, nothing but a good old-fashioned exorcism, of course. Now, the mad thing about that is that the Church of England still, to this day, can perform an exorcism, which is mad. Anyway, on the 5th of October, 1974, two ministers by the names of Father Peter Vincent and Reverend Raymond Smith were assigned the task of performing the ritual in the St. Thames Church in Barnsley. In a scene straight out of a movie, the two ministers started trying to rid Michael of his demons by the obvious method of throwing holy water at him and forcing a cross into his mouth. Michael did his part by immediately starting to scream and convulse on the ground, spitting and biting. And he was acting that way so much that he was restrained. The ministers managed to count 40 demons inside of Michael. Now, I'm not really sure how you take a register of demons, but they seem to manage to do so. And as such, they subjected him to 8 hours of an onslaught of being doused in holy water and forced to confess all his sins. After 8 hours of this exorcism, everyone was absolutely shattered, and the ministers decided they need to take a break, and Michael would need to return another day to free himself from the 3 remaining demons. Now, they had taken a register, of course, so they knew which demons were left. Now, you would read this and you would hope that it was the demon of helping grannies across the road, and the demon of free ice cream, and the demon of lovely puppies. Sadly, that wasn't the 3 demons they decided to leave in him. The demons were of insanity, murder, and violence. Now, why the fuck would you stop there? And why would you tell the man that if you have just restrained for 8 hours and made to go through a massive ordeal that left inside him with the demons of insanity, murder, and violence? Anyway, they just send him home on his way and say, pop back tomorrow and we'll get those pesky last 3 out of you. Well, it turns out that wasn't going to go to plan. Less than 2 hours later, Michael would brutally attack and kill his wife Christine and the family dog. Just before 10 a.m. the following morning, the police receive a call from a man to say that he had found a man naked in the street, covered in paint, and could they come and see to him. PC Ian Walker, just starting his shift, responds to the call thinking, well, it's a bit of a joke, innit? It wasn't a joke, and it wasn't paint. When PC Walker arrived at the scene, he was greeted by Micheal Taylor, covered head to toe in blood, speaking the words, "It is the blood of Satan. I have killed my wife. I know I have." Michael was obviously taken to the local hospital to be checked over, and it was found that he had absolutely no injuries, and the blood, in fact, was not his. PC Walker went to go to Michael's house, and on arrival, he found a senior officer outside of the property throwing up, having already been into the house. His advice was to PC Walker was to not go in. But PC Walker was a nosy wee fella, and his curiosity ran over. And in hindsight, I bet he wished it hadn't taken over. On entering the house, he found the front room absolutely covered in blood and, well, bits all over every wall and surface of the room. On the floor in the middle of the room lay the body of Christine Taylor and the remains of the family poodle. Christine had had her face torn off, her eyes ripped out and thrown across the room, and her tongue removed from her mouth. The dog had been strangled and had its legs pulled from its body. They also found teeth marks all over the dog. Sorry, I did say it was a bit gruesome at the beginning. After finding this horrible scene, the police obviously turned to look for a murder weapon, but they couldn't find one. And that was because Michael hadn't used the weapon at all. He'd done all of this with his bare hands. Michael says he didn't remember doing any of it. Obviously, he was arrested and sent to be tried. He, however, wasn't found guilty, and he was acquitted on the grounds of insanity. Neither the prosecution or the defense ever denied that Michael had severe mental issues, and during the trial, Michael himself gave testimony saying that he had no recollection of it and believed his wife was possessed, and he had set her free. He was deemed legally insane and sent to Broadmoor Hospital, which is a secure hospital for the criminally insane, for 2 years, before being sent to Bradford Hospital and kept in a secure unit for another 2 years, before unbelievably being released back into society. After his release, Michael continued to suffer from depression and on 4 occasions tried to take his own life. There was obviously a huge public outcry after the trial and to try and ban exorcisms. But as I said earlier, the Church of England can still perform them to this day, but they need permission from, one of the big bosses. However, the last recorded exorcism was that in Ossett. The fact that the ministers involved in Michael's exorcism maintained throughout the trial, and indeed afterwards, that he had been possessed by demons, says a lot about what was going on. To me, it feels like a massive defense that, oh, no, he was definitely possessed. But, well, anyway, I'll leave that to your own opinions. Michael led a very scared and sheltered life after that. He was never quite the same again, obviously. He did appear at court again in 2005, accused of sexual assaults on 3 minors. And his insanity from his earlier case kind of reared its head again, and he was sent again for treatment. Now, my big takeaway from all of this is that I feel terrible for his 5 children. How would it be for them to have been brought up in a house where not only did they lose their mother, but it was their father that did it? And he didn't do it for any means of reward. It was just a mad in case of insanity one evening. But I would say, however, I have a really deeply unsettled feeling that the Anglican Church were partly to blame for this, in my opinion. They basically left a man who was deeply disturbed and mentally unwell with a seed of murder in his brain after forcing him through what was essentially a medieval torture session. The one thing I would say that was the good that came out of this was that Maria Robinson, who was the leader of this group, was stopped in her tracks, essentially. After what had happened with Michael, and Christine, she kind of stopped what she was doing and put a cap on it in what in my mind would have developed into a cult. And that is the story of Micheal Taylor. Actually, that's not true. That's the sad story of Christine Taylor. My thoughts on this, like I said, it's a really gruesome thing, and I could have gone into more detail about the actual crime itself, but decided actually you don't want to listen to all that kind of stuff. My takeaway from this is always that he was clearly a man that was not well and needed help, and the help that he tried to seek, because they obviously did go and try and seek help by going to a group of people to try and not be so isolated and maybe get him out of his depression, and what that turned into was people that almost forced him into the scenario that he got himself into. So I hope that answers your challenge, Phill. Demons. Thank you very much for making me look into a case like that. That's has taken up a bit of my life this week, and it's not time I will get back, but thank you very much for that anyway. As always, thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have enjoyed it, you can always subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or wherever you decide to listen to your podcasts. If you'd like to chat some more or get involved with Twisted Britain a bit more, you can find us on social media. We're on Twitter at Twisted Britain. We're on Instagram at Twisted Britain, and we're on Facebook at Twisted Britain. You can also join our discussion group, which is on Facebook, which is just Twisted Britain Discussion Group. Just pop that in the search bar and you'll find us. Everybody's welcome. Come along. We're an ever-growing group of lovely people. I will get a chat with Phill during the week at some point, and we'll record that for the start of the next episode to see what he thinks. But as always, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next time. Thank you. Love you. Bye.